Welcome to the Accountable Intelligence Podcast.
So this is Accountable Intelligence, and we're going to talk really about the potential impacts of AI as it relates to those of us we're calling the commoners, and that's the non-tech CEO of an AI company. So I'm Lucas Drex, and I have Sean Floyd with me here, and Sean is the current operating officer. I said current, goodness, chief operating officer at Antian Technologies. And I think one of the goals we have is so I work in technology, Sean works in technology, and really the goal we wanted to get to is how do we build awareness across the board, not just for technology folks, about what the positives and negatives, and probably more focus on the negatives here of AI are going to be for us as we kind of move forward, and especially for our kids. So that's kind of the high level overview of what we hope to talk about. But I'll turn it over to you, Sean, for maybe some of your goals for the discussion.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. Obviously, when you say some of the negative things, there's from kind of, I guess, my viewpoint, you either see the world is kind of a not in the know,
Yeah,
not really paying attention to all of the changes and impact that the AI world has started to press upon us, and then those that are in the know, there's a lot of concern around all the what ifs, how that will affect daily lives, and obviously us being in the IT world in some capacity, or more importantly, having kids who are going to be the recipients of whatever this world is,
yeah,
that's where the concern comes from. So we're here to
for
try
sure.
and push the envelope and figure some things out, and if nothing else, get people talking and moving in the right direction.
Yeah, for sure. And I like to highlight there on the kids part again because the technology that we've talked about for what maybe I don't know how long we've been in technology, probably 20 years, the two of us, right? And it's you're almost always talking about something that's securing something or doing something with really a purpose of making of a measurable benefit for humans in general, right? So that bad guys don't get it, so that something isn't stolen. But for AI, we're talking about, I mean, a whole maybe next level of impact to how work is done, to maybe the resources that the next generations have available to them. So I think that's it really underscores kind of the game changing impact it could have. One thing you kind of touched on is the we'll say in the know, like the awareness of AI and maybe what that means for people not in industry or out of industry. What would be your, if you can recall, like what was your first maybe instance where you thought this is bigger than I thought, or this is really, I don't want to say worse, but this style technology is advanced to the point where it gives me concern.
Yeah, well, I'll be honest. Even though I'm in this world and I'm very curious, I actually just somebody showed me a video. We might have talked about this. It was just a YouTube special called The Thinking Game. Publicly available. I had a buddy of mine who's really into agentic AI and playing around and curious and stuff. And in fact, he's our CTO as well. And he just told me, "Hey, watch this video." And the video really brought home the idea, like sort of the moral dilemma. If I can put it simplistically, uh, you know, we're in the world of agentic AI, and there are things that can be done that could really help. You think about pushing research in the health field and cures and things like that. But on the other side of that, you could also use it for not so good type things, weapons related things, and uh,
Yeah,
and and it's you know when you think about the sort of the depth, or what's the word I'm looking for, how you view what's right and what's wrong could really change depending on what level you're looking at it from.
yeah,
We live in America. From a national standpoint, do we look at, hey, if we are taking AI and using it to enhance our weapons, or is that, are we saying, hey, that's going to defend America? Or are we looking at that like, hey,
yeah,
that's just putting it to use that we don't need to. And then, from that same sort of level or platform, what if we decided, no, we're not going to do that? But what if some of our adversaries are using it in that way?
Yeah, that's right.
It's a real dilemma. It's almost like one of those things where you got to say, well, is the entire world going to agree that, hey, we got to take a time out and try to only use this for good? Because if not, then again, it goes back to, well, if the bad guys are doing it, we got to do it. So just
Yeah.
I don't know if I went too far off the deep end there.
It's great.
But
Yeah, I like the
that
correlation
video
because
really.
it really feels like. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say. So yeah, that video, the thinking game, really made it hit home and made me start thinking about these things. And not to mention, it explains, it explains in a very simplistic way how we've got to agentic AI present day. For even for the
Yes.
just a common person. So
Yeah, good point. I like a couple
yeah,
things that you called out there. One, I like the moral dilemma question because I think it really is something that it's really extreme. So, for example, it could have extreme impact. It has some really extreme positives in that impact. So it could be game changer for like health. And it might have been in that documentary or another was like the research on protein and how that enhanced computing and reasoning capability provides
yeah,
significant health research advances. But then there's also what you were just talking about, which is essentially an arms race almost on the agentic
there you
AI
go.
perspective to say, okay, who has the best intelligent agents? And then from there, can we afford to get behind folks who we feel like really have negative thoughts or plans for America and for other Western countries? Can we afford to get behind them in the research side? So I like the moral dilemma framing of that, and then also I think it has a lot of corollaries to like the nuclear arms race. So like everyone
There you go.
started stockpiling nuclear weapons. We got to build the biggest, the baddest, the most for years, and then I mean, you think about the terror that the Cold War kind of had
Yeah,
for even for school children hiding under desks. So I think a lot of corollaries there, and definitely interesting topics that are going to get to discuss as we hash through these. So one of the other things we talked about was really kind of the disconnect that in seeing what we're seeing. So you talked about like when you watching that documentary, you started understanding, okay, this has really broad implications for what we're doing. So I think a lot of folks are using AI, and almost all of us are using it for something kind of different and maybe specific to a use case. Like, hey, help me do this, or give me a workout plan so I can lose 10 pounds in 5 days, or whatever it is, right before you go to the beach, right? So, but I think that it really, when you step back and look at it holistically, it really does have such a far-reaching impact that the awareness part there is what we're hoping to get at. So not just in, hey, I want to go ask, almost like Google, like I want to go talk to AI, Chat GPT, Claude, whatever that is, ask it a question, get a response, and move on. That's really almost the tiniest, least impactful part of the AI problem, right? Like that's just like
right.
the user interface almost. So hopefully we can get into some of that on the agentic side, and you used that term a couple times. Then maybe we can talk through that on a separate a follow-on podcast. But so from an industry perspective, what do you see maybe as a disruption jobs wise to the roles we're in? So we're both working technology. I don't know if we'd be called white collar or not, but we certainly spend a lot more time sitting at a desk interacting with a computer than out touching grass. So what do you see maybe as the primary impacts for those folks?
Yeah, that's a great question, man. On the surface, what I'll say is, one of the interesting things I see, a lot of the lead tech companies, the lead AI companies, their leadership, you see them kind of saying, hey, AI is going to enhance, make life easier for us. But
Yeah,
and then conversely, in headlines, you'll see where, well, this group just laid off 20,000 employees, and because AI can do what those employees were doing, it
yeah,
doesn't turn off. And just at the surface, yeah, that's a scary thing to think about. And it's not industry specific. I mean, I think I saw something 2 days ago. It was this post of what happened in the last 24 hours, and one of them was HSBC laid off a ton. I think that was it, the 20,000 employees,
wow,
because they figured out how agents are going to do that. So that's the financial industry, right? You're seeing that in the tech industry, Silicon Valley, different places like that. You have things like that. But looking at that in the financial industry lets you know that the capability is there to touch a whole lot of things. Anywhere where you have digital operations, there's a chance that, hey, we can automate that. So again, at the surface level, and I think when you dig in it a little bit more, you start to ask, okay, well, does this mean that the way that those let's say those employees whose jobs are sort of in jeopardy now need to turn and pivot and be able to have some cursory level understanding of how AI works, to sort of pivot in their job roles. And I think the challenge in that is, realistically, is everyone going to be able to do that? I know myself, I'm getting up in there in age. I'm not as cognitively as sharp as I was at one time. And that's just the reality of, is everyone in a position to do that? And is there a place, just from a job perspective? I think that's the question there. And then on the other side of it, sort of predicting, will there be new jobs? Will there be new opportunity? We're a capitalistic society, right? Those that are making the money, are they going to turn around and invest that back into the people? Those are all really, really tough questions, I guess. And I don't know that I've figured that out yet. I just say it's concerning.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I think that's a good conversation around it, though. And I think to your point, like the conversation is really around like what you and I kind of initially probably thought when we looked at AI tools was, oh, this is great, potentially productivity enhancing. In other words, they're going to be able to do the work faster with me, right? And now you start seeing all these mass layoffs, and you think, okay, they're going to do the work faster without me, which is that's a different scenario. Yeah, yeah,
It
different ball
is.
game for that. Yeah,
That's right,
for
man.
sure.
We're gonna all have to be plumbers or something. I don't know,
That's
but
right. Yeah, that's.
yeah, it's
We'll we'll get to go outside a lot more often. That's what I'm hearing. Yeah,
there
mowing
you go,
grass. I'm gonna
man.
start a
Like we
landscaping
tell our
company.
kids, right? Go outside, get off that
That's right.
phone,
Yeah,
get
beautiful
out in
day
front
out
of that
there.
TV, go outside.
Yeah, right on.
Yeah.
So, and I think we'll kind of wrap up here briefly with a couple of things. One, in reading through AI research and summaries, I think several of those documentaries really do a great job. And what was the name of the one you mentioned? I think I watched that one as well, but I can't recall the name.
The thinking game. You
The
can
Thinking Game. That's
go
right. Yeah. So the
right
Thinking
on
Game.
YouTube. Just type it in.
Yep.
There's no, yeah, free for
Yeah.
everyone. The thinking game.
Yeah, great insight into kind of how AI gets here, and also I think it touches on some of the things that start to get you a little worried. And one of the key things, and I'm reading a couple books on AI and some of the researchers there. A lot of the researchers who started working towards AI have expressed their own fear. And so I think Doug Hofstadter is one of those folks, and he talked about being absolutely terrified, which is that's not like a calming message from someone who really was a foundational
Someone
pioneer
who's an
and kind of
expert.
helped. That's right. Helped train the folks who end up going out to Google and to OpenAI and these other organizations and got them started. And he's saying, literally, his speech was, "You all have gone way too fast without any real safeguards around controlling some of these agents and things." So I think that's really where we hope to delve in and say, okay, how do we bring in industries? How do we talk to people who are across these different sectors with their own unique impacts, and then hopefully be able to say, okay, here's what we see as a way to potentially help it go back to where what we got into IT for is one, we obviously everyone has a financial gain motivation, so you're not trying to shut them down, but you also have the implications of you want to make sure that it's actually benefiting humanity as a whole. So if AI starts taking over every job that there is, and then there's no one to buy AI products, obviously that benefits no one, including the AI companies. So some key and concrete, hopefully, kind of feedback items we can continue to discuss. So
If we think about what accountable intelligence is, like we said, the goal of this is to get people talking and like make sure people are aware, and there's a baseline level of intelligence and understanding around the impacts of this, and then that from there, we pivot to how do we establish some level of accountability across the board?
Yeah,
I think that's where accountable
exactly.
intelligence comes from.
Certainly. Yeah, accountable from a technology perspective, so it does what you ask it to do, which is a whole nother fear stream. Accountable to, hopefully, in a democratic society, the people, so that it is actually beneficial and not just job and threat reducing. So anyway, there is a
There
there's a
you go.
couple threads that we'd like to pull as we dive into this. So looking forward to getting started.
Likewise, man.
Right on.
You know,